Hi there, welcome to a polymer clay jewelry video here at my YouTube channel and my blog, keepsakecrafts.net. This video begins a 5-part series on making Christmas charms out of oven-baked polymer clay. This cute Christmas stocking is a fun little project to make to get you in the holiday spirit. So the things you will need: you'll need a piece of fabric, and here I just have a scrap of denim to add texture to your piece, and a bit of packing tape. You'll also need 2 scraps of typing paper. I'll show you what those are for later. And also any kind of jar lid, just a flat, slick surface. This will just help us, and you'll see how I use that later. You'll need a coffee stirrer, a needle tool. This is just a sewing needle that I made a handle for out of some scrap polymer clay. It's probably one of my most used clay tools. You'll need an eye pin, wire cutters, pliers, and a single-edge razor blade. You can use a clay blade, but everything is so small, this is a little easier to manage. Then for clay, you'll need some small amounts of white, green, and red clay. When I'm working with polymer clay, I like to work on one of these. This is just a smooth ceramic tile that I got at the hardware store. This one is 6 inches square, and it's great for small projects. There's 4-inch squares, 12-inch. They're wonderful because you can bake your project right on them. You can shape things. They clean up easily. You can scrape up clay with a blade. I love using these. I have quite a variety, and they're very helpful. So to start our stocking, we're going to gather about a 1/2-inch ball of red clay. Make sure before you use your clay that it's well conditioned. That means you've mixed it around in your fingers or in a pasta machine for a little while so that all of the plasticizers that are in the clay are evenly distributed. This will make sure that it's strong after baking. Once you have your 1/2-inch ball of clay, just roll it in your hands a bit to make sure you smooth out any seams. Place it on your work surface and just roll it into a log that's about 3/4 of an inch long. Next, we're going to use our fabric for texturing. And before we do that, one of the problems with fabric and clay is that it tends to create lint, which sticks to the clay. So a little bit of packing tape, just kind of burnished down on the fabric and then peeled off, will help remove a lot of that excess lint and such, and keep our clay a little bit cleaner. Next, place your log in the fabric and just roll it. And you actually do want to roll it firmly enough to lengthen it to about 1 inch long. We're going to try to keep all of our charms under 1 inch so that they'll hang nicely as earrings or a pendant or charms on a charm bracelet. And you can see there's a nice texture there. Next, place your finger on one end, place your thumb about 1/4 of an inch from the end, and just press in the bend of the stocking. You can set it flat on your work surface, and you can continue to use the fabric to kind of pat it down and shape it into that traditional Christmas stocking shape. So there's our basic stocking shape. Now, the tricky bit, white clay. White polymer clay is notorious for gathering every stray bit of lint, cat hair, and dust within a 10-foot radius. So we need to take a few precautions. The first one is to use a baby wipe and really wipe your fingers well. And then rather than wiping them on anything that's just going to gather more lint, just kind of wave them and let them air dry. And then, believe it or not, that is not enough. This little lump of white clay is what I call my sacrificial white clay. And what this does, believe it or not, there's probably bits of red clay in the fingerprints of my fingers. And so what I'm going to do is, for a minute, squish around this bit of sacrificial white clay, and it'll gather up. See, I don't know if you can see some of the red color. It'll gather up lint. Also, take a minute, the baby wipe off your work surface. Now we're ready to manage white clay. And if you see any bits of lint in your white clay, you can just take your needle tool, pick them out. So now from your white clay, you're going to roll 2 little balls, somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch, about 3/16 of an inch, or 3 to 4 millimeters. Next, you're going to take your scraps of white printer paper, and on one of them I've written the word white. I'm only going to use this paper with my white clay. And what I'm going to do is use it to flatten one of those balls into a thin circle. This helps keep my fingers off it, which not only prevents fingerprints, but also helps keep it clean. And do the same for the other one. You can use your blade to just lift it right up off the tile. And one of these gets applied to the heel of the stocking. And just kind of use your fingers to gently pat it down on all the edges. And then the other one gets applied, you guessed it, to the toe. And like I said, just gently pat it down so it's even all around. There, that's looking more like a stocking. And now we're going to take our needle tool and add a little detail. Lay it on your work surface, and be careful if you need to pick it up with your hand, just handle it by the red part. That way you won't risk dirtying the white. And make dots all along the edge. And if you like, you can take your needle and kind of drag it in between each of those dots onto the red. And it just kind of looks like it's stitched. Just makes it look like it's more part of it. You could certainly skip those steps, but that's a lot of what I find is fun, is adding the details. And there, that's kind of cute. Now, back to white clay, which means back to, because we've been handling the red clay, back to the baby wipe, back to our sacrificial piece. And now you're going to roll for yourself a ball of clay about 1/2 inch in diameter. And then roll this ball into an 1.5 inch long snake. And if you see any big pieces of lint in there, like there's something long, you can pick it out with your needle tool. Once you have it about 1.5 inches long, go ahead and just use your fingers to flatten it. And you can also take the baby wipe and kind of wipe it off a little. That will remove some of the gunk. And now wrap this around the top of your stocking. And where they overlap, just pinch it off. And use your fingers to blend that seam. Don't stress too much about them not matching perfectly because we're going to texture this. Then take some of that leftover white, roll a little ball, flatten it a bit, and tuck it in the top of the stocking. And again, use your fingers to just smooth the edges a little bit. We are going to texture this, like I said, so it's not, you don't have to make it perfect. And now this is where our lid comes in. I find it difficult to hold on to it while I'm texturing the cuff without making a mess of the details I've already added. So having a nice slick surface, I'm going to press it on there, just gently, not too firmly, but firmly enough so it will hold. And now I can hold this up and texture it. And now you take your needle tool and you just make little circles. And you can see how it makes it look fluffy. And you just go around the entire cuff. And if you accidentally ding some of the red, you can grab one of those little crumbs of white that comes off and put it over the spot. And just work your way around the whole thing. You can see how handy this little lid is, helping you hold everything in place so you can work. And there. Isn't that cute? I think this is when the whole thing really comes to life, adding all that texture. And then you can just ever so gently remove it from the lid. Now another thing that's tricky about white clay, for some reason it is softer than all the colors and it can get squishy and hard to hold the detail. So the best thing to do with a project like this is to actually let it sit for even overnight. I left mine on the lid overnight so that you can handle it and add our final details without smashing any of the stuff you worked so hard to add. So we're going to set this one aside, and I'm going to show you how to do a couple more things. We're going to make little holly leaves. These are really cute. This is just a tiny pinch of clay, maybe 1/8 of an inch. Roll it into a bit of an oval, and then use your paper to just flatten it. Don't flatten it too much, just flatten it a bit. And this is where our coffee stirrer is going to come in, because this will be the perfect cookie cutter. And we're just going to take 3 little bites out of each side. 3 on this side. And you have a holly leaf. Now I know that's a little wonky looking. First of all, you can remove the clay from the stirrer, and you should remove it after every leaf. You can just pull it out with a needle tool. And then you can actually use the stirrer to kind of reshape your leaves so they're a little bit neater. Often I like to put down my fingernail and I'll squish, kind of use that to shape those leaves into points. And then take your needle tool and draw a line down for the vein, the center vein, and make 3 of those. And if you make some that look truly terrible, which has happened to me, you can just roll it up in a ball and start again. Don't forget to add your veins, and then you can use your blade to scrape them up off the surface. And then the best way I've found to apply them is to use a needle tool. Just press on one edge to pick it up, and then gently lay it where you want on the stocking. Now because this is a piece of jewelry that's going to be worn, we don't really want sticky outy bits, because they'll just get caught on clothing, sweaters, and break off. So I'm going to place these on and then gently pat down all those tips so that none are left sticking up. Final bit of clay are the berries, and you're going to pinch off the smallest bit of clay you think you can manage to pinch off, probably a 1/16 inch ball. Roll that into a bit of a snake, and then cut that into 3 pieces and roll those into balls. Now to roll these into balls can be tricky because they're so small. Just put them on your work surface and just roll, and sometimes they make ovals. Just use the lightest possible touch and then press them lightly onto your stocking. Now this is the point where I would strongly encourage you to let this rest, and I'd put it like this so we don't squash any of our nice texture. I strongly encourage you to let it rest for at least an hour or so, if not overnight. The last step is to add our hook, and I have one here that's been sitting overnight. So our hook is going to be, or our hanging loop is going to be made from an eye pin. And we're going to trim that so that there's about 1/4 of an inch of wire from the bottom of the loop to the cut. Now if I were just to stick this piece straight in here, it would stick right now because the clay is sticky. But once the clay is baked, it will pull right out. And you could glue it at that point, but what I like to do is use my pliers to make a hook in that wire end. And then insert that into the clay before baking. And once that's in your clay and the clay is baked, it's embedded in there and it's not going to be able to pull out. So that's a much more secure way of doing it than glue. And you can see here, here's our stockings all baked with the hooks in there. Now, sometimes white clay doesn't bake beautifully white, and even all our efforts. And so if you want to, you could touch this up with a little bit of white acrylic paint to make it whiter. When it's time to bake your creations, be sure to bake them for the recommended time and at the recommended temperature for your brand of clay. For example, my brand says to bake them at 275 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes for every 1/4 inch. Now this is about a 1/2 inch wide at its thickest, and that means this will need to bake for an hour. And the best way to do this, where you've got a texture that you don't want to squash, would be to put it on some crumpled up toilet tissue and then bake it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please be sure to check back every Wednesday in November and on the first Wednesday of December for a new charm. And on the last day, I'll show you how to put them all together into a really fun Christmas bracelet. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a like and share it with your friends who you think would enjoy. Check out the other videos up on the screen. And you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and on my blog. Happy creating. Bye-bye.